The morning sun barely pierced through the thick, gray clouds over the Deathworld Academy. The wind howled across the jagged cliffs, and the students shuffled nervously into the massive stone hall. It was not just any day. It was the day of the forging challenge, and everyone knew it was going to be brutal. In the center of the room, the teacher, a towering alien with multiple arms and glinting red eyes, slammed a heavy metal staff onto the stone floor. The sound echoed through the hall like a warning. "Today," he announced, "you will forge a blade. One blade, sharp enough to pierce steel, strong enough to withstand fire. The best will be rewarded. The worst will face the penalty." A collective shiver ran through the students. The penalty was never spoken about in detail, but the fear was enough. Most students were seasoned apprentices, trained for years in the art of forging. They already knew the rules of the academy. Weakness was punished. Failure was not forgiven. Among the crowd, one small figure moved quietly. A human girl. She was short, with unkempt hair and big, curious eyes that seemed to see more than anyone else. She carried no special tools, no sharp metals, just a simple satchel and a quiet confidence. Most of the students didn't even notice her at first. They assumed she was just another fragile human, like the many who had failed before her. The teacher continued, pacing slowly, his many arms folded behind his back. "You have one day. Forge your blade. Tomorrow, we will test your creations. Do not fail." Students rushed the benches, grabbing heavy hammers, glowing molten metals and sharp alloys. Sparks flew as machines whirred and fires roared. Every sound echoed with intensity. The clang of hammers, the hiss of molten metal, the occasional scream of failure. The human girl stepped back, watching carefully. She did not move to grab metal or a hammer. Instead, she scanned the workshop, her eyes landing on a small pile of bones discarded from the previous day's practice. The other students laughed when they saw her. "Are you serious?" one shouted. "You can't forge a blade from that. It will break before it even touches steel." She did not answer. Instead, she knelt down and picked up a long, curved bone. It was rough, jagged, and completely useless by anyone else's standards. But she held it carefully, examining its weight, its shape, its balance. To anyone else, it was just a dead remnant of some creature. To her, it was a challenge. As the day progressed, the classroom buzzed with activity. Sparks flew everywhere, fires glowed brightly, and the smell of hot metal filled the air. The other students showed off their techniques, shaping metals into deadly blades, each trying to outshine the other. They mocked her constantly. "Hey, Bone Girl, you're going to get punished before anyone else," they shouted, laughing. The human girl ignored them. She worked silently, using her small hands to scrape, grind, and shape the bone. Her movements were precise, almost delicate. Sparks flew as she rubbed the bone against a sharp stone, and she hummed softly to herself. Time passed quickly. The noise around her became a blur. She did not notice when a group of students sneaked behind her, trying to knock her work aside. One grabbed a heavy hammer and swung it toward her bone. She barely moved, twisting at the last second. The hammer smashed the stone behind her, sending dust and fragments flying, but her bone remained intact. The students froze, surprised. She had moved in a way that made it impossible to hit the bone. Her eyes glinted. She had planned for this. Humans were small and fragile, yes, but we think differently, she reminded herself. Where others use brute strength, she used speed, precision, and understanding. Every action she took was deliberate. Every movement had a purpose. By midday, most students were exhausted. Their metals were hot, their arms sore, their muscles trembling. The human girl, however, had barely broken a sweat. Her bone had taken shape. It was small, yes, but perfectly balanced. Sharp edges gleamed in the dim light of the workshop. She held it up, examining it from every angle. The other students stopped and stared. For the first time, there was silence. The teacher moved closer, his multiple eyes narrowing. "Interesting," he muttered in a low, rumbling voice. "I did not expect this." A student whispered, "It's just a bone, it will break." But the human girl only smiled, a small, confident curve of her lips. Sometimes, she thought, the smallest weapon can surprise the largest opponent. Afternoon came, and the challenge moved into a critical phase. The students were now expected to test their blades against hardened metal and stone. Most failed immediately. Their shiny metal swords bent, cracked, or chipped under pressure. Sparks and screams filled the room. When it was her turn, the human girl stepped forward calmly. She held her bone blade with care, almost reverence. She pressed it against the metal block. A few sparks flew. Then, with a swift motion, she sliced through the block cleanly. Gasps filled the room. The student stepped back, eyes wide. The teacher's gaze intensified, studying the blade, studying her. "How?" one student whispered. She ignored them, adjusting her grip and testing the balance once more. Her movements were elegant, quick, precise. Every cut, every strike was calculated. It was not brute force that made her blade deadly. It was intelligence. She understood weight, momentum, and timing. The day continued, and rumors began to spread among the students. "Did you see her blade? It's just bone, but it's cutting like steel. How is that possible?" The human girl stayed focused. She didn't brag, didn't boast. She just worked, honing, sharpening, testing. Every challenge the teacher threw at her, she met calmly, intelligently, perfectly. Even as the sun began to set and shadows lengthened in the massive hall, she continued. The other students had given up, tired, frustrated, defeated. The teacher's attention never left her. There was a strange tension in the room. Everyone knew something extraordinary was happening, but none could predict what would come next. Finally, as the day ended, the teacher raised his staff. Enough. The students dropped their blades, breathing heavily, sweat and grime covering their faces. All eyes turned toward the human girl. She held her bone blade calmly. It was small, simple, unassuming, but deadly in its own way. The teacher studied it for several long moments. Then he said almost quietly, "You may have just changed everything we know about forging." The students whispered among themselves. Some laughed nervously. Some stared in disbelief. Even the strongest, most arrogant students looked unsure. How could a mere human girl, armed only with a bone, have survived the day and created a blade worthy of attention? She did not answer. She simply cleaned her blade and placed it carefully on her workbench. Her eyes sparkled with quiet determination. She had proven something, but this was only the beginning as the students filed out of the hall. Some sneering, some whispering. She stayed behind a moment, looking at the horizon beyond the academy walls. Somewhere deep inside, she knew the challenge was far from over. The blade she forged today was more than a weapon. It was a symbol that humans, small and underestimated, could achieve the impossible. And in the shadows, some students were already plotting. They did not understand her yet, but they would soon. The human girl, however, smiled faintly. She did not need to prove herself to anyone. Not yet, because tomorrow the real challenge would begin. And this time, the bone would not just be a blade. It would be a legend. The morning fog still clung to the jagged cliffs surrounding the academy. The wind carried the distant cries of creatures native to the death world. Inside the massive stone hall, students had returned, buzzing with excitement and tension. Today was the next phase of the challenge, testing the blades in real combat simulations. The human girl arrived quietly, her small satchel clutched in one hand, the bone blade from yesterday neatly wrapped in cloth in the other. She did not rush like the others. They stomped, shouted, and flexed, trying to intimidate everyone around them. She merely observed. Humans were few here, and even fewer succeeded in surviving a single day, let alone excelling. But she had learned something crucial yesterday. Strength is fleeting. Strategy endures. The teacher, his red eyes glinting like molten metal, stepped forward, his many arms stretched out, pointing at various students as he spoke. Today, your blades will be tested in combat simulations. Each of you will face multiple opponents. Only the sharpest, quickest, and most clever will survive. A ripple of nervous energy ran through the room. Some students flexed their muscles, adjusting their metal weapons, but the human girl stayed calm. She knew brute force alone would not save her. Her small stature was a disadvantage, but her mind, that was her greatest weapon. The first round began. Large alien students charged each other, their metal blades clanging against shields and other weapons. Sparks flew like fireflies. Screams echoed, and the smell of molten metal and blood filled the air. Many failed instantly, their overconfidence leaving them open to simple attacks. Her turn came. She stepped onto the stone platform, her bone blade gripped tightly. Her opponents were larger, stronger, armed with sharp, polished steel. They laughed at her. "This will be easy," one boomed, towering over her like a mountain. She smiled faintly. Humans are underestimated, she thought. That is their weakness. Her strategy was simple but unique. Instead of facing them head-on, she moved like water, fluid, unpredictable, slipping between their defenses. When one swung his massive blade, she rolled, using the motion to redirect him slightly off balance. Sparks flew as metal scraped against the stone. Another opponent lunged, thinking to overpower her, but she ducked and jabbed her bone blade at his side. The tip didn't pierce deeply, but it caused a reaction, a moment of hesitation. In combat, hesitation was enough. The larger students grew frustrated. They had not expected such nimbleness. They were used to strength, size, and brute force. But she was different. She was human, and humans, especially her, thought differently. A group of 3 opponents surrounded her. Most would panic in such a situation, but she did not. Her eyes scanned, calculating. One held a sword high. The second tried to flank from the left. The third attempted to trap her in the corner. She ducked under the first, sidestepped the second, and vaulted over the third's foot. Her movements were precise, almost dancing. Every strike she made with the bone blade was calculated. She didn't rely on cutting steel. She used speed, balance, and pressure points. A jab to the shoulder, a quick strike to the leg. It wasn't about killing. It was about control, and that small, underestimated bone blade, she realized, could exploit weaknesses metal could not. The crowd of students watching gasped. Whispers spread. How is she surviving? It's just a human girl, and she's defeating them. It doesn't make sense. Meanwhile, some students were growing desperate. One of them, a tall, scaly alien, decided to cheat. He lunged forward, attempting to grab her from behind and throw her off the platform. But she had anticipated it. Humans are small, yes, but adaptable. She twisted in midair, using his momentum against him. He stumbled, crashing into the stone platform with a loud thud. A cheer went up from a few students who were beginning to respect her skill. The teacher's many eyes followed every movement. He could see the uniqueness in her approach, the careful planning, the creativity. Most students relied on power, predictable tactics. She relied on strategy, observation, and the element of surprise. By the middle of the day, it became clear she was not just surviving, she was excelling. Each opponent that underestimated her failed to clever maneuvers, misdirection, and well-placed strikes. Her bone blade, though simple, had become an extension of her mind. It was light, fast, and adaptable, perfect for the human girl's style. Even more surprising, she began to exploit her enemies' arrogance. They assumed humans were weak, that her blade could not harm them. Every false move, every small stumble she feigned, drew them into a trap. One by one, their mistakes multiplied, and she took advantage of each with surgical precision. At one point, she faced the strongest student in the academy so far, a massive alien with arms like tree trunks, wielding a sword that gleamed like silver fire. The platform shook under his weight. Most students would have run or panicked, but she stood her ground. She observed him carefully, noticing the rhythm of his swings, the slight favor he gave to his dominant arm, the tiny tells in his footwork. When he struck, she moved like a shadow, sliding under his blade. Her bone blade flicked upward, grazing his armor. It wasn't enough to harm seriously, but it caused enough discomfort for him to stagger. She repeated this, a pattern he could not read, until finally he overextended. A swift pivot, a jab to a joint, and he lost his balance, crashing hard onto the stone floor. The crowd gasped, disbelief on every face. The human girl exhaled softly. Her strategy had worked. Size and strength were formidable, yes, but intelligence, adaptability, and cunning could topple even the mightiest foe. As the day wore on, students grew frustrated, some openly angry. They began to whisper among themselves, trying to form plans against her. "We need to attack together," one said. "We can't let a human girl show us up." But she anticipated this too. She moved unpredictably, avoiding traps, using misdirection and exploiting confusion. Every time they thought they had her cornered, she was already somewhere else, striking precisely where it hurt the most. Even the teacher seemed impressed. He rarely intervened, but today he observed carefully, studying her tactics. Perhaps there was something new to learn from humans, something beyond mere strength. By late afternoon, the students were exhausted. Their arms ached, sweat and grime covered their faces, and frustration simmered. The human girl, however, remained calm, focused, and ready. Her bone blade, now polished and sharp, had proven itself again and again. The final round was announced. A free-for-all combat. All students would face each other simultaneously. Most thought it would be chaos, but she saw an opportunity. Chaos favored the adaptable, the clever, and the observant. She had all three in abundance. As the whistle blew, students charged at each other. The sound of clashing metal filled the hall. She moved fluidly among them, avoiding attacks, striking where least expected. Her bone blade cut through armor gaps, exploited weaknesses, and guided larger opponents into collisions with each other. Her small size, once a disadvantage, now allowed her to slip through gaps no one else could navigate. Whispers spread through the crowd once again. How is she surviving this? It's impossible. She's a human, but she's dominating them all. The human girl smiled faintly. Humans are underestimated, she thought. But they forget one thing. Humans are clever. Humans adapt. Humans survive. By the end of the free-for-all, the floor was littered with exhausted, defeated students. The teacher raised the staff again, signaling the end of the challenge. All eyes turned to the human girl. She stood alone, her bone blade gleaming under the dim light, her breathing steady, her posture calm. The hall was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, whispers turned into murmurs of respect, admiration, and disbelief. Students who had mocked her now looked uncertain. She had shown them that size, strength, and intimidation were not everything. Strategy, intelligence, and creativity could win battles that brute force never could. The teacher approached her, his many eyes narrowing in approval. "You have done something remarkable," he said slowly. "Most would have failed by now, but you have proven that the mind can surpass the body." She nodded politely, keeping her expression calm. Her work was not done yet. The challenges were far from over. But today, she had shown them all one undeniable truth. A human, even small and underestimated, could conquer far more than anyone expected. And in the shadows, some students still plotted, unwilling to accept that a mere human could outsmart them. But she didn't mind. They could try. Because the human girl had a plan, a strategy, and a mind sharper than any blade. Tomorrow, the true test would begin. And by then, she would be ready. The first rays of dawn stretched over the jagged cliffs surrounding the academy. The air was colder than usual, carrying a metallic scent that made many students uneasy. Inside the massive stone hall, the clatter of weapons being readied echoed to the vast chamber. Today, the stakes were higher than ever. The teacher stood at the center, his many arms folded behind him. His eyes, sharp and red like molten metal, scanned the room. "Today," he announced, "you will face the ultimate test. Every student will fight in pairs, then in small groups. Only the clever, adaptable, and skillful will survive." Whispers ran through the students. This was not just a combat simulation. It was a test of skill, strategy, and endurance. Many had already failed to grasp the subtle complexities of battle. Most relied on raw strength, unaware that intelligence could outweigh even the sharpest blade. The human girl adjusted the strap on her satchel and checked her bone blade. Yesterday, her mind and blade had survived tests of strength. Today, she would face something far more dangerous. Opponents who had learned from her previous victories. They would anticipate her moves, try to trap her, corner her, break her. But she had prepared for this. As the pairs were announced, her heart beat steadily. She would face the Academy's most unpredictable student, Zarek, a towering alien with reflexes that rivaled most humans combined. Zarek's metal sword gleamed in the dim light. Many whispered that he had never lost a duel. When the duel began, the tension was immediate. Zarek lunged forward with blinding speed, swinging his massive sword with deadly precision. Most students would have been crushed instantly, but the human girl did not move like most students. Her body flowed like water, slipping under his blade, twisting in midair, landing lightly on the stone floor. Her bone blade, small and unassuming, flicked against Zarek's armor, grazing him lightly. It wasn't a heavy strike, but it disrupted his balance. He snarled, frustrated that his overwhelming strength was ineffective. The crowd watched in awe as she danced around him. Each strike was calculated, precise, almost like a chess game. She wasn't trying to overpower him. She was studying him, observing his rhythm, his weaknesses, the slight hesitation before each attack. Humans are small, she thought, but that is our advantage. We can slip where others cannot. Zarek adapted quickly, swinging faster, trying to corner her, but she anticipated him, moving unpredictably, using her small size to evade and her sharp mind to create openings. She noticed the tiniest shift in his posture, the fraction of a second before he overcommit. That was all she needed. With a swift motion, she jabbed the bone blade at his side. It didn't pierce deeply, but it caused him to stagger. A small misstep, amplified by her precision, was enough. In that instant, she flipped behind him, using his momentum to push him off balance. He fell hard, the floor rattling beneath his weight. Gasps erupted from the watching students. But the battle was far from over. Zarek rose, eyes blazing, and lunged again, more cautious this time. The human girl did not hesitate. She shifted her stance slightly, angling her body so that each movement was optimized for both attack and defense. Her bone blade became an extension of her mind, every strike calculated to create maximum disruption with minimal force. Other students began to notice something remarkable. This was not just skill or luck. She was thinking in patterns, predicting outcomes, exploiting the tiniest weakness. Every strike she made, every dodge, every feint was part of strategy beyond brute strength. Humans, she realized, were underestimated because others could not comprehend the complexity of their thinking. Zarek's attacks grew fiercer, faster, more desperate, but she remained calm. Sweat glistened on her brow, but her movements were fluid, precise. She had learned to conserve energy, using her opponent's strength against them. When he swung wildly, she dodged and redirected his momentum into the wall. When he tried to trap her, she slipped through his guard effortlessly. The teacher watched silently. For the first time, he considered the possibilities of human ingenuity. Most creatures relied on raw power and intimidation. She relied on observation, adaptation, and calculated risk. That was a skill rare in the academy, even among the best. After several minutes, Zarek hesitated for the first time. He was skilled, yes, but even the strongest could not anticipate every subtle movement. She noticed a small flaw, a slight favoring of his right leg. Timing it perfectly, she feinted left, then jabbed her blade upward at his knee joint. The strike was precise, almost surgical. Zarek stumbled, unable to recover quickly. The hall erupted in whispers. How is she doing this? It's impossible. No human has ever survived this long. But she didn't pause to listen. She moved to the next opponent. Two students now, attacking in tandem. Most would panic in such a scenario, but she thrived in chaos. Her mind raced, calculating angles, predicting strikes, planning evasions. Her bone blade flicked between them like lightning. One misstep, one overextension from her enemies, and she exploited it immediately. By mid-afternoon, it was clear that she was dominating. Larger, stronger students had fallen, some exhausted, some humiliated. Her opponents whispered among themselves, unsure how to approach her. Many attempted traps, coordinated attacks, or brute force assaults, but every plan failed. She adapted instantly, slipping through gaps, redirecting momentum, and striking where it would cause maximum disruption. Even the students who had mocked her yesterday began to watch in awe. This small human girl, with nothing but a bone, had survived challenges that would have broken the strongest warriors in the academy. She had not relied on strength. She had relied on skill. And that skill was not just physical, it was mental. She observed, predicted, and adapted. Every misstep from her opponents became an opportunity. Every attack, a chance to turn the tide. Every strike, precise and meaningful. By late afternoon, the final round began. Multiple opponents attacked simultaneously. The hall was filled with the sound of clashing metal, gasps, and shouts. Students expected chaos, but she turned it into advantage. She moved fluidly between attackers, slipping through openings, striking in perfect timing. The bone blade, though small, seemed alive in her hands, responding as if it could read her mind. The climax approached. Her final opponent was a massive alien with a double-edged sword, known as the undefeated champion of the Academy. Most would tremble at the sight. Most would surrender before a strike. But she stood firm. She had learned, observed, and adapted. This was her moment. The champion lunged, swinging the massive sword in a wide arc. She twisted, ducked, and flipped backward, landing lightly. Her bone blade jabbed forward, grazing his armor. Another feint, and he overcommitted. She sidestepped, using his momentum to send him crashing into the stone wall. The floor trembled. Gasps and whispers filled the hall. But the battle was not over. He rose, more cautious, more aware. He attacked again, slower, more deliberate. She analyzed every move, every shift, every subtle tell, timing her strikes perfectly. She exploited a weak joint, a misaligned guard, a slight hesitation. Step by step, she dismantled his offense without ever relying on raw strength. Finally, with a feint and a swift, precise jab, he staggered and fell. Silence filled the hall. Even the teacher, usually stoic, blinked in surprise. The undefeated champion had been bested, not by brute strength, but by intelligence, skill, and adaptability. The human girl stood alone, her bone blade gleaming faintly in the dim light. She had proven something extraordinary, that a small human, underestimated and overlooked, could surpass even the strongest when armed with skill, strategy, and courage. The students who had doubted her yesterday now watched in awe and disbelief. The hall, once filled with arrogance and overconfidence, was now filled with respect and uncertainty. The teacher approached, his many eyes focusing on her. "Remarkable," he said quietly. "You have shown that skill can outweigh strength, that intelligence can surpass brute force. Humans, perhaps we have underestimated you." She nodded silently, her expression calm, her mind already thinking ahead. This was only the beginning. The challenges ahead would be even more dangerous. But she had proven one undeniable truth. Humans adapt, humans endure, and humans can surprise anyone, anywhere, anytime. As the hall emptied and the students nursed their bruises in pride, she stood by the platform, bone blade in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. She was ready for the next challenge, for the next battle, for the world that had doubted her from the start. And in that moment, everyone knew something had changed. A small human had become a force to be reckoned with. The sun had barely risen over the jagged cliffs when the announcement came. Today was the ultimate test, the culmination of all challenges, the one every student dreaded and few survived. The massive stone hall was transformed into an arena, its walls lined with spectators from across the academy. Aliens of every shape and size watched, some whispering, others simply staring, waiting to see if anyone could surpass expectation. The teacher stood at the center, his staff tapping the stone floor with a slow, resonating echo. His red eyes scanned the crowd, finally resting on the human girl. "Today," he said, his voice low and commanding, "all your skills, your strategy, your speed, and your intelligence will be tested. This is the ultimate trial. Survive, and you will be remembered. Fail, and you will be forgotten." A hush fell over the arena. The air was thick with tension. Many students whispered nervously, remembering how the human girl had outsmarted and outmaneuvered nearly every challenge before. Some scoffed, believing she had been lucky. Others looked fearful, realizing that luck alone could not explain her skill. The human girl adjusted the strap on her satchel, slid her bone blade free, and observed her surroundings. The arena was filled with obstacles, elevated platforms, narrow pathways, and scattered stones. There were multiple opponents, some larger, stronger, armed with polished steel blades. This would not be simple. It would be chaos. And chaos, she knew, was both a threat and an opportunity. The whistle blew. The ultimate test had begun. Students charged at each other, screaming and clashing. Sparks flew as metal met metal, and the sound of collisions echoed like thunder. Most students relied on sheer force, swinging their swords recklessly, trying to dominate anyone in their path. But the human girl moved differently. She did not charge. She did not attack first. She observed. Her mind raced, analyzing patterns. Opponents moved predictably, even those who had seen her before. They expected speed from her, but they underestimated the depth of her strategy. She ducked under a heavy swing from a towering alien, rolled across the stone floor, and jabbed her bone blade at his leg joint. Not enough to harm him seriously, but enough to force him to stumble. Timing, placement, precision. Her advantage was thinking faster than her opponents could react. From above, a student tried to ambush her from an elevated platform. She spotted a movement out of the corner of her eye. Humans are small and quick, she reminded herself. She ran toward the platform, using the stones as leverage to leap upward. Mid-air, she twisted, striking with her blade at a pressure point on his torso. He shrieked and fell backward, crashing into the arena floor. The crowd gasped. Opponents began to coordinate, realizing they could not defeat her individually. 3 of the largest students cornered her near the center of the arena. Most would panic, but she didn't. Humans are adaptable, she thought. Adaptability beats brute strength. She analyzed their movements. The one on the left favored his right arm. The one on the right had a slight delay in his footwork, and the center student overcommit when swinging, timing each movement perfectly. She sidestepped, struck at joints, used momentum to redirect attacks, and slipped between them. One by one, her opponents stumbled, collided with each other, or fell. The teacher observed silently, nodding slightly. He had trained the strongest warriors, yet he had never seen strategy executed with such clarity, speed, and effectiveness. The human girl's intelligence was as deadly as any weapon. The next wave of opponents was stronger, faster, and more cunning. Some carried dual blades. Others wielded polearms designed to keep her at a distance. Most humans would have been overwhelmed, but she had learned to think several steps ahead. She used misdirection, feints, and the environment itself to her advantage. A swinging chain became a tool. A loose stone became a trap. She guided opponents into collisions, exploited overreaches, and maintained constant movement. A massive alien, known as Koroth, charged toward her. His armor glinted, and his sword looked like it could split stone. Most students froze at the sight, but she smiled faintly. Humans are underestimated, she reminded herself. And underestimation is a weapon itself. Koroth lunged, swinging with brutal force. She rolled, ducked, and used his momentum to pivot him off balance. She jabbed her bone blade at his leg joint, causing him to stumble further. Sparks flew as metal scraped stone. With a quick twist, she redirected his momentum into the arena wall. He crashed with a thunderous boom, groaning in disbelief. The crowd murmured. Humans had never displayed such skill. Their movements were too small to be noticed initially, but they had an intelligence no brute force could match. But there was no time to rest. Another student, faster and smaller, attacked from above. She ducked, sidestepped, and used her blade to create a small diversion, causing her to collide with another student. Chaos erupted around her, and yet she moved like a calm river, navigating obstacles, exploiting every mistake. As the sun reached its zenith, exhaustion began to creep into the students' movements. Even the strongest faltered, sweat pouring, muscles trembling. But the human girl's focus never wavered. Her mind was sharp, her strategy flawless. Her bone blade, though simple, acted as an extension of her intellect. Every strike, every movement, every dodge was precise and intentional. A sudden shout drew her attention. A new challenger emerged, Vorin, a legendary fighter in the academy. He wielded dual blades, known for unpredictable attacks. Most students had avoided him, fearing defeat. The human girl's heart rate increased slightly. This was the ultimate challenge. But she had faced worse in size, worse in strength. Intelligence and strategy would guide her now. The duel began. Vorin moved swiftly, striking from multiple angles. Most would be overwhelmed instantly, but she anticipated patterns, dodged, feinted, and used the momentum of his strikes against him. Each motion became predictable, each opening calculated. She struck precisely at joints, exploited weak grips, and forced them into mistakes. The arena was silent, the crowd mesmerized. Sparks flew from the collisions, dust swirled around them, and the tension was almost unbearable. Every student knew that if she failed here, all previous victories would mean nothing. But she remained calm, calculating. Humans adapt, she thought. Humans endure. Humans survive. After several minutes of relentless combat, Vorin overextended. She feinted, twisted, and delivered a precise strike to his torso. He stumbled, off balance, and fell to the arena floor. Silence filled the hall, broken only by the heavy breathing of exhausted students. The teacher approached her slowly, staff tapping the stone floor. "You have exceeded all expectations," he said, his multiple eyes studying her closely. "Not by strength, not by size, but by intelligence, strategy, and skill. Today, you have proven something extraordinary." The human girl nodded calmly, breathing steady, eyes scanning the arena. She had survived the ultimate test, outsmarted every opponent, and displayed a skill no one could deny. But deep inside, she knew this was just the beginning. Some students, bruised and battered, watched her with a mixture of fear and admiration. They had underestimated her, mocked her, and yet she had conquered every challenge thrown her way. The arena, once filled with arrogance and confidence, now hummed with respect and disbelief. The human girl sheathed her bone blade and stepped down from the platform. She had proven that intelligence, strategy, and adaptability could surpass brute force. She had shown that even the smallest, most underestimated human could achieve the impossible. And in the shadows, some of the Academy's most cunning students were already plotting. They would not forget this day, and neither would the human girl. For tomorrow, new challenges awaited, and she would be ready, because humans are not just survivors. Humans are legends in the making. The arena was quiet now, except for the soft clatter of discarded weapons and the occasional whisper of awe from the spectators. The ultimate test had ended, leaving behind bruised students, dented armor, and the faint scent of metal and smoke. But among all the chaos, one figure stood unscathed, calm and composed. The human girl. She sheathed her bone blade carefully, its edges still sharp, glinting faintly in the afternoon light. Her small frame seemed fragile compared to the towering aliens around her, but her eyes held a quiet confidence that no one could ignore. She had survived, she had outsmarted, and she had conquered the impossible. The teacher, his multiple eyes watching closely, approached her slowly. His voice, deep and resonant, filled the hall. "Human," he began, "today you have done what no one else could. You have proven that strength is not everything. Intelligence, strategy, and the ability to adapt, these are what make a warrior truly formidable." A hush fell over the students. They had fought, struggled, and competed with all their might. Yet they had witnessed someone far smaller and seemingly weaker achieve more than anyone could imagine. The hall, which once buzzed with arrogance and mockery, now pulsed with awe and a newfound respect. Some of the students who had laughed at her yesterday now looked at her with uncertainty, perhaps even fear. But fear was mixed with admiration. They could see clearly now. This human girl was extraordinary, not because of her size or strength, but because of her mind and her courage. The teacher continued, his voice steady. "You have shown that even the smallest, most underestimated individual can rise above challenges when they rely on intelligence and skill. You have changed the perception of humans in this academy today. Never forget that lesson, all of you." The students shifted uneasily. Some muttered apologies to the human girl. Others just stared, unable to form words. Even the undefeated champion, who had been toppled by her precision and strategy, offered a nod of respect. It was a rare gesture from someone whose pride, but it spoke volumes. The human girl did not boast or gloat. She simply nodded, acknowledging their gestures quietly. She had no need to prove herself further. Her actions had spoken louder than words ever could. She had earned respect, not through intimidation, but through brilliance, perseverance, and the courage to act when others hesitated. As the hall began to empty, the students began to discuss what they had witnessed. Whispers filled the corridors. "Did you see how she moved? She was like water, flowing and striking at the perfect moment. I underestimated humans. I was wrong. Even the ones who had doubted her most could not deny the truth. She had reshaped their understanding of power and skill. It was not brute force alone that mattered. It was the mind behind the action, the strategy guiding every strike, and the courage to challenge expectations. Outside the arena, the human girl walked quietly along the stone pathways of the academy. The wind rustled her hair, and the distant horizon shimmered under the afternoon sun. She thought about the day's challenges, the battles, the tests, and the moments where she had relied not on strength, but on intellect and quick thinking. She realized something important. Respect was earned not by dominance, but by proving that one could rise above limits. As she reached a small balcony overlooking the cliffs, she saw some of the students she had faced earlier. They approached cautiously, unsure she would react with anger or pride. But she smiled faintly. I misjudged you," one admitted, bowing slightly. "I thought humans were weak. I see now we were wrong." Another student added, "Your strategy, your skill, it's incredible. You've shown us all something we won't forget." She nodded, keep her tone calm and gentle. "I only did what I had to do. Strength and size matter, yes, but intelligence and courage can change the outcome. Don't forget that lesson. It applies to more than just combat." The students stood in silence for a moment, absorbing her words. Then slowly, one by one, they nodded, some bowing slightly as a sign of respect. It was rare in the academy for students to openly acknowledge someone in this way, but she had earned it not through fear, but through unmatched skill and integrity. Back inside the arena, the teacher addressed the remaining students. "Take note," he said, his voice echoing through the stone walls. "Humans may be small, underestimated, and seemingly fragile, but underestimate them at your own peril. Today, one human has proven what can be achieved with intelligence, strategy, and courage. Remember this lesson, for it is far more valuable than any blade forged here." A silence fell over the hall once again. The students who had survived the ultimate test reflected on their mistakes, their overconfidence, and their inability to anticipate the human girl strategy. Pride and arrogance had blinded them. Intelligence, adaptability, and foresight had triumphed. The human girl returned to her quarters quietly, placing her bone blade carefully on the shelf. It was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of everything she had proven. Every strike, every dodge, every feint had been a lesson, not just to herself, but to the academy. Humans could survive, humans could excel, and humans could earn respect in ways no one expected. As she looked out of her window at the sprawling cliffs and distant mountains, she reflected on the journey. Challenges would continue. Bigger threats would appear. But she had learned something vital. Being underestimated was not a weakness. It was an advantage. Where others expected failure, she could turn it into opportunity. Where others relied on strength alone, she could rely on intelligence, adaptability, and courage. And the academy had taken notice. Today, she had earned respect. Tomorrow, she would continue to earn it in ways no one could foresee. Even as the sun set over the jagged cliffs, casting long shadows across the academy, one thing was clear. The human girl had changed the perception of humans forever. She had shown that size, strength, and appearances were not the ultimate measure of ability. Brilliance, strategy, courage, and perseverance were what truly define a warrior. From that day forward, whispers of her skills spread across the academy. Students who had once mocked humans now spoke cautiously. Respect mingled with wariness. Teachers who had dismissed her now considered the untapped potential of humans in ways they had never imagined. The human girl smiled faintly to herself. She did not need recognition or applause. The respect she had earned was enough. It was quiet, meaningful, and lasting. It was respect earned through action, intelligence, and courage, the kind of respect that no one could ever take away. As night fell over the Deathworld Academy, stars twinkling in the dark sky, she stood at her window once more. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, new battles. But she was ready, always ready. Humans survived, humans adapted, and humans endured. And she in particular had shown that even a small human could achieve greatness, change perceptions, and earn respect that would echo long after her time. The Academy had witnessed the rise of a human unlike any other, a human who had turned weakness into strength, simplicity into strategy, and a mere bone into a symbol of triumph. And in the quiet night, one thought lingered in her mind. This is only the beginning.